Thank you very much, Sergeant at Arms. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This roundtable discussion on Bill number 318-33 is hereby convened. I'd like to thank my good colleague, Senator Tommy Morrison, for joining us this evening. Ladies and gentlemen, the format for tonight's discussion is what we will be doing is I will be addressing some of the issues and concerns that were raised during the course of the initial public hearing on this piece of legislation. This is a roundtable discussion. I'd like to listen to stakeholders and representatives of the community in terms of how we can enhance the legislation and what direction it should continue to take. Prior to proceeding with the overall presentation, we do have a slide presentation which highlights the different issues. Like I mentioned a little earlier, we're going to go item by item, and then following the conclusion of that particular discussion, I will open up the floor for general comments or suggestions in terms of looking at the legislation bill number 318-33. So prior to beginning the overall presentation on the slide, I'd like to invite the following individuals to please join us at the table. And please, ladies and gentlemen in the audience, if by any chance you have not signed in and you would like to participate in the discussion, you're more than welcome to join us. Mr. Enrique Torres, Adrian Gogui, Randy Sablan, Peter Tran, Linda Tetreau, Diane Strong, Doris Lujan. I'm going to continue as long as we have seats available. Please, folks, join us up front. Mr. Michael Borja, Department of Land Management. Thank you, Mr. Director. Mr. Frank St. Nicholas, Rick Meno, and John Arroyo. Mr. Chairman, please, if you would like to join us up front. Just for the information of the public, in accordance with the public notification requirements, the initial notice went out on the 19th of July, and with the assistance and the support of our media partners in the community, I would like to extend an appreciation for the assistance in disseminating the information. And then the second notice was disseminated to the stakeholders and to the community and to our media partners on the 25th of July. We will be discussing bill number 318, and I will just highlight the title, and then I'll go ahead and go in toward the discussion on the presentation. This is an act to amend subsection 61105 of Article 1, Chapter 61, Division 2, Title 21, Guam Code Annotated, relative to requiring the approval of municipal planning councils for proposed projects under review by the Land Use Commission. And if we can go to the first slide, please. If you can follow along with me in the overall presentation. And this would address not only the components of this particular proposal, but a few of the issues that were brought up during the course of the public hearing. In any action by the Commission under this title, including but not limited to approvals of changes in zone variances, appeals, and all other actions, 4 affirmative votes of the members of the Commission shall be required. The chairperson of the Commission shall vote on all matters before it. And then the amended additional provision that's added in bill number 318 is for each variance application, zone change, government lease, conditional use application, and other proposed project reviewed by the Guam Land Use Commission involving land in Guam, the relevant municipal planning council of Guam's respective villages shall register its approval or disapproval with the Commission. No project application shall be approved by the Guam Land Use Commission unless it has received the approval of the relevant municipal planning councils through a resolution adopted pursuant to subsection 40128F of Article 1, Chapter 40, Division 4, Title 5, Guam Code Annotated. Issue number 1, Bill 318-33 COR grants authority to the Municipal Planning Council, MPC, to review and approve variance applications, zone changes, and government leases. However, the Guam Land Use Commission, GLUC, does not review or grant leases on government lands. Ladies and gentlemen, please be aware that these are issues that were presented by individuals that provided testimony, and keep that reference in mind. The references for this is the government leases must be approved by the legislature. For reference, 21 GCA subsection 60112 states, notwithstanding any other provisions of law, government-owned real property shall not be sold, leased, sublease, exchanged, or otherwise transferred without the prior approval of the legislatura, the legislature, by duly enacted legislation. Based on this issue that was brought up, the analysis reflects the nuance here is that a CLTC lease may be executed based on a conceptual development plan, and when structures and uses are eventually proposed for construction, they may require a variance or a zone change. The exception to strict application of Section 61617 variance requirements or processing by GLUC at Section 61616I applies to government, public uses, and services. And the question that was posed was, are all CLTC leases government or public in nature? Considering the new commercial lease program, Public Law 33-95, which is intended to generate revenue for the CLTC Survey Fund, which pays for survey and registration of unregistered property so it can be leased. Is that an indirect government or public entity? The underlying question here is, in situations such as those where in fact the government leases property, will those properties based on zone changes and variances still have to go through the Guam land use process? The CLTC could indirectly impose the need for variances simply by agreeing to a proposed development plan as a basis for a commercial lease, and they can do that without first consulting the GLUC. An excellent example is the potential or possible use of the Oka Point. If you take a look at that, and any agreement that is consummated between the Chamorro Land Trust Commission and a proposed developer, if the agreement and the understanding is that that piece of property will be designated for a hotel use, then the follow-on question is whether that hotel zone change would have to go before the Land Use Commission. So that's where the question comes in about government leases and whether it's consistent with the process in terms of allowing the Guam Land Use Commission to be directly involved in any zone or variance change. The issue number 2, in many cases, application review committee, and this is where I believe the mayors would be very much interested in terms of the concerns that were brought up. In many cases, application review committee ARC position statements are not received by the Department of Land Management nor the mayor's office prior to the scheduled municipal public hearing. Therefore, the Municipal Planning Council, MPC, as well as the residents in the respective village that attend the public hearing do not have that critical information that is very important. And in the past, the assigned case planner to the application works with the respective mayor's office to lock in a date for the public hearing following the ARC hearing. Upon conclusion of the ARC hearing, each ARC member, GPA, inclusive of GPA, GWA, Guam EPA, Department of Agriculture, Department of Recreation, and BSP, Bureau of Statistics and Plans, to mention the critical ones, are required to submit their department's official position statement on the proposed application to DLM. Problem number 1 continued. Unfortunately, in many cases, those position statements are not received by DLM or the mayor's office prior to the scheduled municipal public hearing. Therefore, the MPC, as well as the residents in the respective village that attend the public hearing, do not, and I have to repeat, do not have that critical information that is very important in terms of the residents coming forward and endorsing or opposing a proposal. Thus, the MPC will make a decision on their approval or disapproval without the benefit of verifying the availability or adequacy of infrastructure or the potential impact to water, power, traffic generation, wetlands, and etc. This is a serious situation that deprives the residents of information. What needs to happen is the MPC must be treated as largely equal to the GLUC. Why do we ask the question that we need to ask ourselves in the present process is, why do we ask village elected leaders to consider implications with less than a full report with agency subject matter experts' input? And I think that this is really an issue that several of the mayors have discussed, not only in the previous public hearing, but in terms of reviewing some of the development proposals that is presented before them. And the question again is, why is it this way? The simple answer is, it's all about the total elapsed time to apply for and receive a decision on the application request. There has always been pressure to go fast or faster. Fast can be dangerous, and considering that approvals are permanent and run with the land, pressure should be relieved. When I reference fast or faster is based on the timeline that the Guam Land Use Commission, as well as the ARC, the Application Review Committee, presently have in terms of reviewing some of these applications. The restricted timeline, and I know eventually the information will be shared by the chairman as well as the Director of Land Management, that in this case, conceivably, they work with a 90-day timeline. When a developer submits an application that is complete and has all the necessary information, then the clock ticks, and then within 90 days, there's this general understanding that that developer or that application a decision will be made on that application within that timeline. This issue may be remedied by moving the hearing back until after the agency submits statements, and move the MPC decision point back so that all the data analysis and testimony is available to the MPC like it is for the Guam Land Use Commission. If we can all refer to the chart, that is, I hope that it's legible enough from your perspective. You take a look at the process right now. This is the Guam Land Use Commission, Guam Seashore Protection Commission application process. So in the preliminary application interview, the PAI, the documents are submitted. If it's a completed package with all the necessary information as required by the Guam Land Use Commission and by the process, then it is accepted. If in fact all the documents are in place, then the clock will start ticking from day 1 through day 10. If not, then it's sent back to the developer for additional review or feedback from the respective Department of Land Management. From day 1 to 10, you do have the timeline required for the Application Review Committee to be able to meet so that they can receive the packets and then start reviewing it. Then it moves on to the Application Review Committee, the ARC meeting, like I just shared with you. Then it proceeds down in the chart to the municipal public hearings, which is required. There are certain timelines there. 10 calendar days public notification by newspaper of general circulation, and 25 calendar days personal notice to the developer and to the adjacent property owners within a certain radius. Following the municipal public hearings, then the Guam Land Use Commission and the GSPC application packet is compiled, which is inclusive of a staff report, the ARC Application Review Committee agency position statements submitted to the Planning Division of the Department of Land Management, and the Agricultural Impact Statement, the AIS, submitted to the Planning Division of the Department of Land Management. Also, in addition to that, this particular section requires public hearing results provided, including minutes, attendance sheets, and the Municipal Planning Council MPC resolution. And then the application and supporting documents are all compiled for review by the Guam Land Use Commission members. If you notice, the proposed legislation would further emphasize the influence and the impact and the decision-making of the municipalities in this entire process. But the existing process does require presently that the Municipal Planning Councils render a resolution and forward it to the Guam Land Use Commission and to the Application Review Commission for consideration by the GLUC. Following that, if you take a look at the red component on the chart, the proposal in Bill number 318 is to take the Municipal Planning Council resolution component and transition it over to the right, where in fact all the packet would be compiled with all the position statements of the respective government of Guam agencies, and then that full completed documentation inclusive of the municipal public hearings will be forwarded to the Municipal Planning Council members for their review and their concurrence, and then subsequently to the Guam Land Use Commission so that they can provide their final decision. Keep in mind that Bill number 318 does require approval by resolution by the municipalities, the municipal planning councils, and then forward it over to the Guam Land Use Commission for further action. This is a very critical component of the overall process. So if I can open up the discussion, I understand that, I've been presenting a lot of information, but I wanted to make sure that the issues were highlighted, that were brought up during the course of the public hearing. But I think that it's very important that we take a look at this process today based on the information that has been shared and see if there are any comments from any of you. Mayor Jesse, if you would like to join us up front. Any comments from members in the audience? Mike? No? John?
One of the members of the board, Victor.
Please, Victor? You sure? Yes, John.
So I guess from what you said while I'm looking here is that there will be an additional hearing to this process specifically for the MPC to review the application request.
If you take a look at the chart itself, the chart that the Guam Land Use Commission, Department of Land Management presently utilizes, there already is a requirement for municipal public hearings.
Right.
And based on the concerns that have been raised by mayors and individuals in the community, that prior to that municipal public hearing, that the mayors and the residents should have access to the position statements of the respective government of Guam agencies that are members of the application review committee. Because really, when you're talking about GPA, when you're talking about GWA, when you're talking about solid waste, when you're talking about expansion requirements for roadways and sustaining the quality of life or improving the quality of life within the municipalities, then all of these position statements should be readily available to the mayors as well as to the municipal planning council. So there's no, based on our discussion so far, there is no additional requirement for a municipal public hearing, but the question would be ensuring that the mayors and the municipal planning councils and the residents in that immediate area have access to all this information.
Okay, so but at what point in time in this process does the MPC get together, discuss, and make their decision? Would that take place in lieu of the public hearing, after the public hearing?
It would have to take place after the public hearing. In light of the concern, the issue that was brought up, keep in mind that information is power, so to speak, in terms of making sure that the residents, as well as all inclusive of the developer, that they understand the individual positions of the respective government of Guam agencies and the application review committee. So once that packet or their position statements have been completed, then the information will flow towards a municipal public hearing, meeting that particular requirement, and then based on the proposal, the Municipal Planning Council as well as the mayor would have to render a decision through resolution and then subsequently forward that to the Guam Land Use Commission.
So at the time the Municipal Planning Council is forming to arrive at a decision, what is the process and the procedure for that? Is the general public allowed to attend those? Is the developer allowed to be there to present his case and his application before the MPC? In regards to,
can we get some mayors to get involved in this discussion, if you don't mind? Or if I can open it up? Yes, please. Right.
Like any government meetings, the municipal planning councils are in fact public meetings. So in the event that how I envision it, in the event that once the ARC does their review and we receive the documentation relative to the position statements of all of the agencies, it comes to the council, or actually then you're looking at the developer having a public hearing in the community, and then shortly after that, then at the next, just like the GLUC, you guys have 2 scheduled public hearings or public meetings a month. MPCs typically have at least 1 public meeting or 1 municipal planning council on a monthly basis. Ours is the 3rd Wednesday of the month. And so it's a public meeting. We take minutes. It's recorded. It's filed. And so the public is obviously invited to attend. The only difference that I see happening here at these municipal planning council meetings is that typically the council meetings don't get well attended by the public, that in the events that we have a public meeting addressing these types of land issues, especially if there are some concerns, we may be forced to have it in a bigger venue. And I think most mayors can accommodate that. Instead of having it in my office, I can have it at a community center and ensure that adequate space and adequate seating and adequate recording devices are available, necessary for that particular public hearing. But yeah, it's a public meeting. So if the developer wants to provide comments to the Municipal Planning Council, which is typically comprised of 10, and villages that are larger than 10,000 residents, if you take a look at the Guam Code annotated, it allows a mayor to add on to the size of their Municipal Planning Council. I think it's one additional member for every additional 1,000 people in their jurisdiction. But for example, Ore Chilampago, Jotnya, Inarahan, Maleso, we have less than, and most of the other villages have less than 10,000 people, so we're maxed out at 10. The only 5 that are eligible to have more than 10 is Chigo, Dedido, Tamuning, Barragata, and Manila, because they have a population more than 10,000 residents. So the law provides that to ensure that they have what we would consider a fair representation of their community, that they're allowed to have more municipal planning council members on their council. In our case, for example, in Ore Chilampago, I try to do it methodically as far as who we've appointed. Ore Chilampago can be looked at as areas. You've got Pago Bay, you've got Santa Cruz area, the Tai area, you've got the Maimai area, you've got the main roads of Route 4 in the village of Chilampago and in the village of Ordet. You've got the inside part of Ordet. And so when I became the mayor, I actually intentionally looked at people living in those areas that would sit on our council, so that all areas within our village were equally represented. In fact, I still have that mix. Is that I have a representative that lives in Pago Bay, I have a representative that lives in the Tai area, I have a representative that lives in Santa Cruz and Maimai, and so on and so forth. And so I'm not sure how the other mayors do it, but that's how we do it in Ore Chilampago.
I think the question I was trying to get at is how will those meetings be conducted? You've been to some of the GLUC hearings. Would it be basically the same?
Absolutely. We follow the Robert Rules of Order just like you guys do.
Okay. So pretty much what we're going to do is have 2 of the same kinds of meetings, one at the MPC level and one at the GLUC level. However, at the GLUC level, any decision that we make would be conditioned upon the decision from the MPC.
If you take a look at the proposal itself, Mr. Roy, I'm sure you very much understand, and I know what you're getting to in terms of having veto authority over a proposed development. But it's really bringing the decision-making process to the municipalities and allowing the residents who will be directly impacted, not indirectly impacted by virtue of being 10, 15 miles away in another village, but directly impacted by the nature of that proposed development. So in this case, even if we have a municipal public hearing that involves the residents of that community, they have a say. In this proposal, they would have a direct say in terms of how they want to endorse that particular development and what additional requirements would be necessary based on the application review committee's decisions. If they say that the water lines are 4-inch water lines and needs to be upgraded to 6, then that's where it would have to require that in fact the MPC be assured by our utility agencies working possibly in collaboration with the developer, so that in fact that quality of life of the residents in that area is not negatively impacted. So in light of your question, having 2 meetings, 2 public hearings, one within the municipality, and then the secondary public hearing would be sponsored by the Guam Land Use Commission, which from my perspective really looks out for the welfare and the interests of the entire island collectively. So if 3 hotels are being built in one particular area and there's another proposal to build another 4 hotels in another area, then the nature of what the impact would be on the infrastructure and the quality of life, that's where the Guam Land Use Commission would render that decision. But if I can ask Senator Brown or Randy if you have any comments you would like to add to this, and I'll come to you. Thank you.
I think that maybe there's a question that underlies all of this discussion, and I know that someone provided a comment along these lines, and that is not so much how will the meeting be conducted, but based on what criteria, what part of law will the Municipal Planning Council use? Where are they best? Where's their best fit in the existing zoning law? And I would say that GWA is GWA. They're going to provide their position statement. I don't think municipal planning councils or even the GLUC are in a position to question GWA's analysis or input. That's really not the issue here. If you look at 61617C, it's specific. This is where it comes to nest. This is where community has a say. And that is it in the public welfare of the neighborhood? And public welfare is quite a broad definition. If you look at legal definitions, it is for the good of community. So taking everything in the application package to that date, it's you don't want, some might say, well, that's subjective. Well, it's not really subjective because it's in the law. Someone makes the call. Is it in the public welfare of the community or neighborhood? The law actually says neighborhood. That's where I think the Municipal Planning Council is going to find their strongest foothold for making a judgment call, just like any commission would, had they the same. And the Land Use Commission does have that authority now. So I think we do need to be careful because, the question has been asked. Well, what are they going to base their decision on? Is it going to be arbitrary and capricious? Well, of course not. I think whatever the standards that the GLUC use should also apply to the municipal planning councils. And of those standards, that one provision is key. It's where it brings it home to community. And one other comment. With regard to the timelines that are imposed on ARC and I don't know that they're really imposed on the GLUC. I think it's by executive order. There's 90 days, etc. That's at the front end of the application process. It's not, I don't know that, because once you get to the GLUC, they can postpone or table, ask for additional information, and in fact, they do that to be able to get all the information and flesh out the issues. I'm kind of not in favor of adding timelines to the Guam Land Use Commission or the Municipal Planning Council. Timelines are pretty good for the ARC. They've got a job to do. They should get it done. But it's kind of a correction because I think what was said earlier was that, it's 90 days for everybody. I don't think it is. I don't think the Guam Land Use Commission has to do anything within 90 days. They just need to get the application, schedule a hearing, and then get going with it. But there could be continuances, and an application could go for months until a decision is rendered or not.
Thank you, Mr. Saban. Senator Brown, and then Ronnie.
It's like we're turning back the clock again. We're sitting in a roundtable with you, Senator Aguon. And I agree with Randy. I think the most fundamental point is who gets to make that decision. Under the current process, a public hearing is held within the jurisdiction that a development is proposed, but obviously, in our case, it didn't require, or members of the GLUC were not there, and the one member that did show up never came forth to identify himself as a member of the GLUC, never went before the crowd to say, I'm here. And it is a fundamental question because as we look at development and where we are going from here, and particularly this development that we most recently have had to deal with in Pago Bay, we're looking at a development that's not even really being proposed for development and benefit of the community. Not even the community in Dededo, Jigo, Inarajan, Maleso, not even on Guam. And the decision has to be made moving forward is who gets to make that decision. Does a select few people, and particularly those that have the bankroll to do it, are they the ones that make the decision? Is it going to be GITA that makes that decision? Is it going to be the select few that sit on the Land Use Commission that make that decision? For majority of us, my feeling as an almost lifetime resident of Pago Bay, give or take a few years off to school here, is no. I don't see the future of Guam, in my view, that is how we should move forward. I think we're reaching a critical juncture, because back in the day when we grew up, we remember driving into Tumon and going down those little sandy roads and going on these little enclaves of Tumon, some of which you kind of see in Gun Beach that soon will disappear. That's what we grew up with. You know, you had the neat Hilton on one side. I mean, you could pick. There's all this space. And then as time went on back in the 80s, the early 90s, during the last major building boom that we had, and we remember those days very well, Randy, then all of a sudden the hotel started filling in with that. And then we kind of said, oh, that's all going to stay in Tumon. Well, Ladera Towers came up out of the blue, out of nowhere. And that, again, maybe it's been there all these years. Maybe the residents are fine with it. The residents weren't fine with it at the time that was being constructed. Land Use Commission historically, and I'm going back 30 plus years because we were around that long, will issue conditions, and they issue conditions that they do an absolute lousy job of enforcing. There is no special division within the Land Use Commission that goes back. We can pick any project, any major project, any hotel in Tumon. Guarantee we pull that file, we look at the conditions and see what enforcement has happened, or the lack thereof. And so now that Tumon is essentially saturated, we have those within the some within the tourism community saying, oh, we need to expand that. We need to expand hotel rooms. We need to accommodate additional growth and development because that's needed. And I ask the question, for who? And for whose benefit? As a resident of Pago Bay, I don't see it as my benefit. I don't see it as a benefit of my family. I don't like the fact that outside interests and outside members that are not even residing in my community get to decide my village and how my village is supposed to develop moving forward. Why does a select few's decision on their land impose on so many others? And that to me is not the Guam I want to see for my future or the future of my family or the future of my little boy that, I don't know, I think it's the 4th or 5th trip he's been to legislation, not a year old yet. God help us when he gets older, what's he going to do? So I really believe that that's a real important fundamental question that needs to be decided. And as time goes on, as I've done this for many years, I remember many years ago during the Ada Blas administration, my boss back then, Governor Ada, was a very pro-development governor. We saw the development during that time. And Engen Hills was built. 5 golf courses were built. All the little spaces in between Tumon. Hyatt, think of all those. Pac Star, that was a big place to be. Those all built during his administration. Very pro-development governor. And there was a similar development being proposed for Pago Bay, actually right in his neighborhood, because it was Ta'i overlooking the cliff line of Pago Bay. And that was the very first time I ever attended a Land Use Commission hearing. Very same thing, very slick presentation. I remember who made it. He still does those presentations, kind of retired now, but still does those presentations. And I had the very same objections. There's nothing compatible with what they proposed, what they were proposing at the time. Fortunately, it didn't get built. But if you're literally telling us as residents that we have no say, and in this case we had no say. I mean, I read the decision that was made. I attended the public hearings. I attended every single one of them. And I don't see anything that was reflective of our concerns, including the total incompatibility of what was being proposed in our neighborhood. The issues of infrastructure. I appreciate Joey Duenas for coming out the other day and reiterating the concern Waterworks had, because that kind of got glossed over during the hearing. There's an impression with the Land Use Commission that you can somehow create a reality by simply conditioning something to death. And then saying, okay, well, you can't operate and pass your sewage through the Pago pump station. You have to bypass the pump station. So therefore, somehow that's going to solve the issue with regards to sewage. And then how are we going to address the issue with regards to water? Right now, Senator, in the existing communities, particularly during the rainy season, and we were there too when Aguon was built. I know it's the irony for the southern part of Guam, because I remember our good colleague, Senator Tony Blas, who said, I give a damn. And he said, I gave a damn because he did. He actually funded and helped support the development of Aguon. The irony of it, as we know, and you know being a southern resident in Jonia, when it rains the heaviest, when water's falling from the sky, most southern residents turn on a tap that doesn't have a lot of water, primarily because that's just the reality. I mean, rainwater is going to kick up a lot of salinity, and it requires a lot of filtering to process and clean that water. So what happens? Waterworks takes water from northern Guam and has to transfer it down. And so what happens to high-lying areas in northern Guam? They have reduced water pressure. And still the residents down south, even though they are getting some water, it's not at full levels. They're getting some, but not enough to get the normal supply of water that they otherwise would get. That's where we're at today, right now, without this development or any other major hotel development in southern Guam. So with those realities there, for the Land Use Commission to go ahead and approve this project that in very tangible ways, not because, oh, I don't like development, in very tangible ways is going to further decrease our quality of life. And they get to do that, and they get to sit at the ITC building in Tumon and make those decisions. And do I think that's right? Oh, hell no. At the end of the day, if I do all this work and I have no quality of life when I come home at the end of the day, and my family has no quality of life, and other people get to make that decision and get to ignore my input and the input of my fellow residents that have lifelong investment, even if it is just your single family home and that's all you have and that's your castle and that's your biggest asset that you have, why is your voice any less important than someone who's walking in here and has millions of dollars to spend? Why do they have a bigger voice? Who the heck are they? So moving forward, I'm very much an advocate for transferring that decision making, because I don't think any member of the Land Use Commission is more informed than a resident. I mean, it actually would make me interested in my village of Chalanpago of wanting to be a municipal planning council member if that's where the decision's going to be. I'm sure for Randy, who's a resident now of Agania Heights still, right, Randy? Former resident of Jigo, but resident of Agania. We returned back to roots in Agania Heights. Probably Randy might decide, you know what, I'm going to sit on Municipal Planning Council of Agania Heights, and there's probably very few people on Guam that have Randy Sablan's expertise, because there's probably nobody else except Mr. Gary Stillberger, who rested his soul is no longer with us, that has anywhere near the experience in evaluating and reviewing large-scale developments, because he was there during the last building boom. Nobody else on Guam has that experience, but Randy does. So if Randy sat on the land use, well, Vanjie does too, but not for that length of time. And Vanjie wasn't at Bureau Planning at that time. Oh, you were? Well, it's okay, but you got to admit, in terms of development, Randy's the one that actually reviewed those large-scale developments. You guys don't get to review the same detail. And to say he wouldn't be qualified, he probably would sit on the Land Use Commission with his level of expertise. People that sit on the Land Use Commission, no offense, but they're just appointed. They're people just like we are. The only difference in taking it to the community level is the community has a bigger say. And seeing how this got played out, I think more the reason the community should have a say. Because this thing got slam dunk in a matter of months. What other communities? You go back to other communities in the U.S. mainland, and you even live in a residential community, you can't even sometimes paint your house a different color, or put up a fence the way you want it, or not maintain your yard. I mean, some of these places have very tough standards that you have to meet in order to either develop in that community or live in that community. One of the other ironies, and Senator, you have other colleagues in legislature, and this is the thing I'm dumbfounded with. We have all these issues now with the military buildup, and we sit here and scrutinize the military buildup, and I'm sorry, you tell me one family sitting at the table, if not themselves, do not have, if not themselves, an immediate family member that has served in the United States Armed Forces. Especially a Chamorro family. You show me one who could stand up here and say, oh, absolutely not. So the military to me is no stranger. I'm a product of a military family. My dad's retired Navy, a combat veteran. Served in River Marine Force in Vietnam. I grew up in that world. And yet the military somehow gets treated like there's some foreigner, stranger coming in and invading Guam. They're our family, they're our own people. And we want to scrutinize, we want to see the environmental statement, all that stuff, man. They better walk a straight line, and they better put the money on the table too. If they want to come in and develop our neighborhood, we got our list of infrastructure and everything else. Thank goodness money's being put forward to waterworks. All these millions of dollars now they're releasing to assist with the buildup. Private development, we are tripping over ourselves, allowing them to come in and build, adversely affecting our communities, and we think that's perfectly okay. We're not up in arms. We're not screaming about that here at the Guam legislature. We're not holding them up to standards because we allow this sort of thing to happen. And why I refer to Ladera is because I was there at the time. Ladera Towers got built to the 4th floor without a building permit. We shut it down at EPA almost 3 times because of not following requirements that they needed to meet. I met with Mr. Hahn and Mr. Dwight Look at the time, who were the owners of that development project, because EPA is the one that called them in and said, hey, you built your towers, you have requirements here under the commission that authorize you to build. Where are the 2 water wells you were supposed to build? excuse me, where is the upgrade to the sewer line on that road from Route 10 into GCC? And Mr. On told me, and Mr. Look told me, oh, that's off-site. That doesn't affect our project. Well, I said, gosh, according to conditions, it obviously does. And if they've since complied with any of these things, they didn't do it voluntarily, and they didn't do it because they chose to and for the good of the community. They did it because pressure came down on them to do it. And it didn't come from the Land Use Commission who authorized it. So I have no problem. As a matter of fact, I will become a lifelong advocate of supporting the decision-making capabilities of the community, because there's no more direct way of democracy. Elected officials are a representation of the community, but you know what? If I get to have a say about what I want in my neighborhood, sure, I would choose that over having a land use commission, because it has not demonstrated to me any sense of confidence that I should put the future of my home and my family in their hands. And I've got more than one piece of property in Pago Bay. I mean, I could shift to the other side of the bay and have a different view. But not everybody gets to do that. And why should I? Why should we change our quality of life to accommodate an interest that doesn't even live here? And accommodate, and look at the public statements of those that have come out to advocate for these projects. They're not the poor people of Guam. They got the money. They're the big money people, and they want more money, and they want it at the expense of the quality of life of my family. And that, to me, is where I draw the line personally. And how we were treated by this commission and ignored by this commission, I don't see anything in the notice of action that even references the concerns that we raised, and this is how we're going to mitigate it. All I saw was, let's just put more conditions. Oh, let's work with the university and the Guam. What the hell does that mean? What do you mean you're going to work with them to do what? Like, it just sounds good because we're doing educate. Oh, we're going to clean the bay. I don't translate cleaning the bay and maintaining the bay to building a high-rise tower that's going to adversely further affect the traffic in my community, my ability to ensure I have steady water pressure, ensure that I have the proper sewer service, because most people, Senator, ironically, do not have sewer connections in Pago Bay. Most people do not have sewer connection in Pago Bay and are even able to access the use of the pump station. I live right up the hill from the pump station. I see that pump station every day. And I don't have anything going through there that comes from my house. And neither does anyone who lives in Indulado, Manasaji, Lujan Drive, Chalan Inda. Because why? We don't have a sewer line connected within our roads to connect us into the sewer system. But a developer can come in and build this monstrosity and they get to connect into the line? Just bypass the pump station? Even if they bypass the pump station, where are they going to connect? At some point down the line, they're going to connect into the GWA sewer system. And they're going to have that waste processed at a GWA sewer treatment plant. So my concern is where they create a different reality by setting all these conditions or conditioning these projects to death, knowing full well they can't be accommodated. Because we're pro-development. I'm not anti-development. I'd like to see all the improvements on Guam. But where those developments are, and are they a contribution to the community, or do they take from the community? And if they take from the community, I don't see the benefit. Who's benefiting? Who's going to benefit from this development? This closed development that says, oh, we're going to have restaurants, but it's going to be a closed facility. It's not open to the public. So what benefit is that to the residents in Jonia or the residents in Pago Bay or the rest of Chalan Pago? So, gosh, I haven't lost my ability to talk, have I? I just got it down, right? It's been a few years, but I just want to point that out because I think we should have no shame whatsoever in saying, oh, hell yes, we want the decision to be made at the community level, because at the end of the day, we live here. We live in these villages. And if these other parties want to come and actually live in these villages, then respect us. Respect us. Because none of us are taking away from each other in our neighborhoods. We're not taking away the view of the rest of our neighborhood or the rest of Guam to come and appreciate the gift we have of living in Pago Bay. This project intends to take an awful lot. In some cases, devalues properties of some of the people sitting at this table. I don't see the advantage of that. What advantage is it going to be to take my property that's worth $700,000 right now, at least according to land management's assessment, most recent one last year, because all of a sudden now I pay more land tax every month, and devalue my property for a fellow project? Why do they get to do that? I think there's some very fundamental questions, and it just doesn't affect us here in Pago Bay. This is cropping up in different, including Tamuning now. Again, for those poor people in Tamuning, and what, they don't have a say either? I think those are just the main points that I wanted to relay with regards to this legislation.
Thank you very much, Senator Brown. Mr. Webb?
Thank you, Senator. Hopefully I can bring the level of passion down a little bit just because of the nature of my type of presentation. But I'd just like to go back to the comment Chairman Arroyo made earlier about alluding to a duplication of roles between the MPC and the GLUC. I don't see that. Actually, I see this as making the work of the GLUC easier, less controversial, because once the development is approved by the MPC, then it's just, dotting the I's and crossing the T's at the GLUC, making sure that they conform, if you will. I would have to say that the GLUC, as in the case of the Pago Bay development, tries very hard to say yes to every development proposal. That's how they see their role. But clearly, if the Pago Bay development had come up before the Orocho and Pago MPC, it would have been rejected. Clearly, it would have been rejected. I also think we can agree that the roles and the qualifications of the MPC members and the GLUC members are similar, if not the same. Both are appointed to their respective boards. Actually, I would say that the appointees that come from the community and sit on the MPC are probably better placed to judge these developments than appointees to the GLUC. But I also recognize that the roles of the MPC and the GLUC, if this bill becomes law, will evolve, and there may be some adaptations required. But one amendment I would like to suggest to the current bill is that the Department of Land Management be instructed to provide the same expert testimony and support that it currently provides to the GLUC to the MPCs, so that they have the benefit of that information as they evaluate these developments, and that a responsible land management employee be required to attend MPC meetings when a relevant project is being discussed. So this is a shift in emphasis away from the GLUC to the MPC, but I think both have a very important role. And I agree with my colleagues and Senator Brown's comments that these changes are going to democratize the process of development in Guam in a very positive and favorable way. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Webb, and thank you for your suggestion, because that was the nature of the issue that we were just discussing, in terms of trying to find a way where, in fact, the MPC members and the mayors of that municipality would have the same position statements that the application review committee members finalize, so that prior to any municipal public hearing, then at least the community and the residents in that particular municipality would have access to that information, understand exactly what the implications are or would be for any proposed development on infrastructure, water, wastewater, power, as well as roadways. So I think that you just also re-emphasize that particular point in terms of making sure that that information is also provided and readily available to our Municipal Planning Council members. We can go with Vanjie first and then Rick.
Thank you very much. I supervised or reviewed comments of the ARC for the longest time, or the first part of my career at GovGuam. I did the geographic information system. So that was a different component of planning, but what I feel that brought to me was a lot of ability to do analysis on a variety of data that I think that then now we've built a good GIS system that a lot of planners are starting to use. I did want to make a comment about some of the process that and we had seen it even within this particular project, where the developer starts to provide additional information at the GLUC level, but that information is never brought back to the agencies or brought back to the municipal planning councils for further review. So I think the whole process of obtaining information to make a decision, it's never really fully transparent or shared amongst all the decision makers, and I think that sort of needs to be, maybe we really need to throw this out and think of a different process so that technical information that comes out from the conversations and discussions and concerns from both the ARC members and the community, the developer has an opportunity to respond, but that information is brought back to the people that are providing some technical information so that they can then provide additional comments. And until that is fleshed, and it may take many iterations, and I know in the Pago Bay situation it had taken several times, but in order for us to come to a better decision, all the information, both from the developer as well as the planning agencies and the community, needs to be fully evaluated. And I think that that's a problem that we have right now, is this urgency to rush through a decision. And somebody might say that, it took 6 months for GLEC to make a decision, or maybe even a year. But I think there's a lot of consequences of decisions, and we're living those consequences 20 years later of bad decisions. And so I think that ensuring that you have all that information before a final decision is made needs to be done. I also feel that the agency's comments, now that I'm speaking as myself, not for GWA, but is really reflective of the administration's comments. Planners, professional planners within the agencies, or professional technical people in the agencies, are basically told what they can and cannot write. So, right, we've had that discussion when you were our director. There's a very complex conversation where planners, the people that know what's really should really happen, cannot really fully write their professional opinion, and that needs to be changed. And maybe when it's more transparent and getting the community involved to make that decision, maybe the planners with their full professional, they too will be respected. Because we talk about, the ARC provided all these conditions. The thicker the comments are, the more that professional planner did not approve that, really want that project. But the way that we get around it, there's multiple ways you get around it, and one of them is that we may not disagree and we may not provide an objection. However, if GLUC chooses to make a decision, here are all the conditions that need to apply. And I think that that's part of the other problem. We condition things to death to a point where we can't manage the conditions. But also, it also reflects that maybe this is not the approach that the developer has taken is maybe not the right approach, and it needs to go back to the table. In the process of looking at the Pago Bay situation, there's many times I didn't understand why the developer wasn't required to go back to the drawing board and redesign their project to fit some critical comments that the agencies were making. I know that it's put on a document that's called the Notice of Action that now the developer needs to address, but we've seen that it's really not enforced, or how they approach it is not necessarily consistent with what the planner had intended. And in fact, after the notice of action is given to the developer, we never really ever see the developer again. Although we had put some conditions in there, the developer doesn't come back to us at any process. And if you're Bureau of Planning, you're not part, or Bureau of Statistics and Planning, you're not part of the occupancy permit process. So you never know if your actual condition was actually integrated into the final decision. So that needs to be changed. I think the flow of information, we all want development that's good for all the community. I also feel that the community doesn't necessarily, through the ARC process or the Land Use Commission process, even in the public hearing, the voice of the community is not actually influencing any of the changes of the developer, any of those things. And I think that we're mature enough now in our development process that we should reflect the community's choices as to what they would like to see their village center, their community look like. And I'm not sure why there's such a adversarial response to this. So I think that needs to be engaged, and it's through the Municipal Planning Council that the voices of the community are engaged. When we go through as Joanne had mentioned, in the Department of Defense process, there's a whole NEPA thing. When you look at the ARC, there's a section where you do socio-economic impact, and it's not a statement where the developer says, yes, I'm socially and economically impacted and this development is going to cure this. It's not that. It's truly a socio-economic impact where they do surveys, they do get the feeling of the community, they do look at what the existing land uses are and how this particular thing will have an effect on the people. And we require it of anybody doing a federal project. And I think that it's time that we require it of ourselves. So that needs to somehow be integrated. I know that occasionally at ad hoc membership can include public health or somebody doing socio-economic, something related to social component. But public health may not necessarily be that person. And it's also ad hoc, which means that they're not necessarily there to review it at all times. They're not required to provide a comment. It's really just the environmental agencies, and then and Department of Parks and Recreation. So we really never get the input of the community or the lens comments related through the lens of the community's point of view. What the social impact will be. What does that mean to crime? What does that mean? I mean, I think DPW provides a traffic plan, but as you can see, it's almost optional. They really they don't have the staffing to do what that really looks like in terms of the number of cars that are sold, what that means to having smaller highways, less arteries, all that kind of stuff. And so I think that if you're not going to fully support all the agencies to provide truly technical people that look at socio-economic impacts, that really look at what the community needs to do, then you need to allow the community to make those decisions for ourselves and somehow put that in there. And maybe it's that at that point that then you are able to engage what the viewscape looks like, because all of the issues that we're talking about and all the things that we all care about in living in this community is something that never gets reviewed through the agencies. I think that's about it for me for now. So I hope that those are, I just also think that we've been there, done that, it's not really working. It's time for us to sit down together and work together to try to figure out with GLUC. I feel like it doesn't need to necessarily be a power struggle here, but somehow how the final decision is made needs to be based on more than what we're doing now, and how the final decision is being made needs to take into consideration when people don't want something in. Because right now, as Rodney said, it seems like it's yes to everything as long as there are conditions placed on it. And it's not about infrastructure, because you know what? As long as you have the money, infrastructure is there. But people that live in those places, even if they had the money, they're not planning to. Their only option is to move away.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Lahan. The takeaway from just your presentation alone in terms of looking at the developer to report back any additional information that's provided to the clock, I think it's excellent suggestion. Also, the application review committee, the position statements in regards to the technical expertise, being able to provide a comprehensive statement of position to the Guam Land Use Commission and to the Department of Land Management. I think that as we look at involving or completing the whole process of ensuring that the municipalities and the mayors have the information, the position statements of these ARC members prior to any municipal planning public hearing, that would allow the residents to question some of these findings, and it would certainly push the entire process towards making sure that these technical expertise really are able to put down some of the concerns legitimately in terms of allowing the residents to be able to review that document. So I think that that's an excellent suggestion in terms of looking at the process, making sure position statements are readily available to the residents so that they can review it and they would be able to ask questions from that perspective. The other aspect is the socio-economic impact. It's a requirement now by many of the federal contracts, and I think that barring establishing any thresholds, in terms of large developers. Certainly that's a consideration when it comes to the impact of the community. So I appreciate your perspective. And ladies and gentlemen, I think she hit the nail on the head in terms of making sure that this is a dialogue. This is a discussion of how we can improve the process. And it's not, I apologize if in fact it's a direct hit towards individuals who rightfully have a desire to serve our community in their best interest right now, sitting on the Guam Land Use Commission, because this is really where we need to look at the process. We need to revisit it, especially in light of some of the anticipated additional developments that will become forthcoming based on the military buildup as well as some of the other activities taking place. So I think it's very timely that we review the process. We look at ways in which we can involve the residents and the community much more so that they are part of that process and they can acknowledge any development that will be coming in. Let me recognize Mr. Torres and then I'll come back to you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Torres?
Thank you, Senator. Just trying to resolve the question you had about the chairman's question about whether the Municipal Planning Council can have the tools they need, the expertise they need. I think the senator and the executive branch, the legislative branch here, you have your duties as public servants you've already given the mayors what's due to them. They do a lot of stuff for the community, and just seeing the signs, you're seeing a lot of people stepping up to the plate. So, and their concerns are there, infrastructure, and they're promising rebuilding sidewalks, even sidewalks themselves. So, in answer to the question, it is a policy thing and it's a regulatory thing that even within a small community as Jonia or Chalampago, I believe that each municipal planning council, given its policies and procedures and regulations, that it can draft itself with respect to, again, approval through the mayor's council or the legislative branch to give them more resources. I think it's going to be a growing thing. We're all going to be able to live together on this island. The future, can I predict the future? No. But I see a future with more benefits for public use. I see a future with the infrastructure. Just the military buildup is going to bring that. So now these mayors in the future will have more things on their plate, but more resources because it impacts them and the communities that they serve. And I'll also join in with Vanji's comments that this is a transparency condition that, as being with the Municipal Planning Council, it helps with transparency. Yes, you may be getting the application from either just the homeowner who wants to go to a two-story or a developer who wants to really do. Look at the heavy traffic now in Aguon. The Pokemon Go is really showing that Aguon can be revitalized, but it is something that we can all work towards, and the transparency, you can't avoid that. Your FOIA requests. Any private resident can ask for FOIA requests, and be prepared. Be prepared. Not just the Land Use Commission, for the mayor's Municipal Planning Council. You want to be free from corruption? That's the best way, is to make sure that the mayors themselves don't feed into temptation for corruption. So that's my comment. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Torres. Chairman Arroyo, and then I'd like to just pose a question to the mayors here. with regards to the process, but we'll listen to your comments, Chairman Arroyo.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out that I don't believe anybody on the GLUC is adverse to more involvement by the community on the decisions that are made by the commission. As a matter of fact, I personally welcome it, and I would like more of the community involvement in these decisions. The only thing that I guess what I was getting at when I was asking those questions is, by doing it the way it's laid out here, we're adding another level of bureaucracy to a process that probably doesn't necessarily need it. Could these hearings be combined into one, so that the duplication of effort's not there, the sharing of the information doesn't have to go back and forth between two different entities, decisions get made at two different entities? Can it be consolidated into one to improve the efficiency? To assist the developers as well as the community, because there could be developments that are beneficial to Guam, but because of the process becomes now protracted, those developers then become turned off and would rather decide to take their investment funds elsewhere where it's not so hard for them to get an approval. Those are the things that I'm thinking of. And again, like I said, I'm not adverse to more community involvement. I welcome it. I wish it would come. The decisions that we make, the work that we do, sometimes not easy. And the more heads that are thinking about this from all different perspectives, all different angles, all different points of view, do nothing but make it better. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Chairman Arroyo. I think that in regards to adding a level of bureaucracy, if adding a level of bureaucracy would allow for municipalities and really the residents who are going to be directly impacted by any proposed development, greater involvement in the process, then it's an additional process that perhaps will take a little longer, but we would get the individuals and the residents and the municipalities and the mayors directly involved in that decision-making process. So to me, I'm really averse to extending the timeline unnecessarily, but if in fact it means reaching out and empowering the residents out there, then it's a process that I'm fully in support of, primarily because in this particular case, it makes your job easier. Members of the Guam Land Use Commission, you have the residents rendering a decision, supporting a development, and in many cases, for some odd reason, people look at it as the residents and the municipalities possibly being anti-development. I don't see that happening. I see the residents and the municipalities standing up for their quality of life and saying, okay, if you want to be our neighbor, you will be a partner in this entire process. So if by any chance you can give back to the community in this format, then we will consider supporting it because you will not diminish or reduce the quality of life of the residents in that area. That's how I see it playing out, working out for our people out there so that in fact they have a direct influence in the process. But if refining the process so that in fact it doesn't extend the timeline, but it involves much greater involvement on the part of the residents who will be directly affected, then certainly that's why we're here. We're here to discuss it. You presently sit as a critical part of the process as a member of the commission. Mr. Bora also is here. We have residents here who have seen the process not work to the benefit of the immediate residents within the Pago Bay project, and it's really looking forward, looking ahead. There's one project, and I'll just, before I recognize another individual, there's a project that came out several months back where a developer came out publicly and said, well, we're going to build a hotel, we're going to build condominiums in this particular part of the southern part of the island of Guam. I was informed that neither the mayor or the vice mayor had any inkling about that proposed development, but the concept was already released. Now, in a situation like that, the question is, okay, you're moving into a neighborhood, so you're disregarding the residents, you're disregarding the mayor and the vice mayor, at least bringing them into the discussion component, even the conceptual aspect, and you're just making a public pronouncement. Whether it's a PR approach, regardless as to what it is, the mayor, the vice mayor were surprised, and also a lot of the adjoining residents in that particular area were questioning the development. It could have been handled a much better way in terms of making sure that everyone understands if this development is going to be endorsed by the residents in that municipality, then by all means, these are some additional requirements that need to be addressed. collaboratively, it could be a collective effort on the part of the government of Guam in terms of the utilities as well as the developer. I'm not trying to throw all the obligation on the developer. It really could be a collaboration in terms of making sure that it's a partnership that ultimately benefits the community and the residents there. So, I mean, just listening at some of the comments and some of the concerns, it all originates with the residents in the municipality. So that's why we're trying to hopefully work towards a middle ground. Chairman Arroyo and Mr. Borja, it's looking at the process and seeing how we can refine it so that we can address some of these very legitimate issues, very legitimate concerns. Mayors, I know before I recognize Ms. Luan, I have a quick question in regards to the process itself, because I know it was mentioned by a couple of individuals in the table in the discussion that perhaps the mayors and the municipalities can adopt rules or regulations that would allow for the process to be recognized and how decisions would ultimately be made in regards to this. So I'd like to hear from the mayors who are here at the table and see what comments you have in seeing if we can work on revising this process, making sure that the mayors are all island-wide collectively on the same sheet of music, and understanding that this is a process, it's open, it's transparent, and this is what, because, I mean, just like Chairman Arroyo asked a little earlier, who would be allowed to attend the municipal planning council meetings when the decision ultimately is going to be rendered? And that's a very legitimate question, because would you allow the community at large to be direct participants and also the developer so that they can respond to any additional questions? So if you have any issues or concerns with regards to this, Mayor Lohan?
You know, I think every citizen in our village should have a voice on what's happening, as far as development is concerned. And we need to hear the concerns of our residents. And as far as consolidating the meeting into just one, I think we should hear the voice of our community first. Because, there are some people that are not actually able to go down to your land use, to ITC building and attend that meeting. We need to present it to our village, and then, after what the decision is, we can prepare a resolution in favor or against what is being proposed for a development. And to be honest with you, I don't think a development will ever happen in Iran as of now. Okay? Up to now, it's been 25 years since the people of Iran were awarded lots at Iyat subdivision. The infrastructure is not there. They have a 2-inch pipeline, and if you allow a developer to come in there, that's going to be a big, major impact in our village. I prefer that it will be done in the village level first, and then we have a say-so, and then, like I said, the municipal council members will decide on what was presented by the residents of Iran, and then we'll prepare a resolution in favor or against what is being proposed. I mean, up to now, people are still struggling. The road conditions, when is it going to be fixed? I mean, that is probably another 50 years down the road. Saloncha Road is owned by private owners. What have the administration done to make sure that the private landowners are compensated for the lots? We will never see a repair for Route 4. The infrastructure at Iha. Those people are hollering. They don't have any roads. They have lots in there. They kind of go to their land to start their homes there. There are, Iha subdivision, there's like 20 or 30 families up there. And the water, I mean, we're having problems with the water situation. Like Senator Joanne Brown says, when it rains, we don't have water. I mean, we have to hear the voice of our residents first. I mean, consolidating, it into just one meeting, I don't buy that. we need to hear them and then prepare a resolution. And I'm pretty sure I brought some of my MPC members here that will like to say something to this. Okay. Tom?
Thank you, Mayor.
Tom?
Please identify yourself for the record.
Hello, can you hear? Okay. My name's Tom Diego, and I've been part of the Enron Municipal Planning Council under Doris Lahan, current mayor, and previous mayor Franklin Tidegui. And I've actually participated in development approval through the land, through the IMPC. When under Franklin, we did have a public hearing. Developer was there present, and the residents were there present to voice their opinions and concerns. And after the presentation was done, we had all the information from the developers, and we had some representatives from the different departments. They addressed whether they're for or against it because of if infrastructure could support or not. Based on that information, we passed a couple, but these were small developments. One of them was McCrout's hot dog stand when he was developing that. That was one of them. Now there was another one. They want to propose a condo down there in Iran. That one didn't get passed. The developer had a representative come. We had a public meeting, but he had nothing. All he had was a draft form. And he goes, "This is what we want to do. We want to build Chamorro Village." But in reality, they wanted to build condos there. But what they provided us with draft and said, what we want from you, or what we need from you, the Interim Municipal Planning Council, is to approve this. And we said, well, the residents around here, have you informed with the residents? And he said yes, and we had some residents there, and they heard nothing about it. And so we did not give them our support, and the development didn't happen. Those are the small developments. Now, the larger development, like the landfill, that was basically, it happened without, there's basically a lot of conditions put onto it, but a lot of those conditions, like, oh yeah, you know what, don't worry, we'll take care of this, we'll do the infrastructure, make nice roads and all that. Yes, nice roads from Route 4 inside, yes, but Route 4, they didn't take care of that. There's nothing there. If we have this bill, then we can negotiate like the communities in the states, where they would say, yes, okay, we do have to have it, but what are you going to do for our community? What are you going to do to protect the environment? We will hold them responsible because this is our land, this is our community. And whatever agreement or development we pass, it's on us. Nobody else, it's on us. And our community agrees wholeheartedly with it. So this is what we did, we allowed it to happen. Whereas it's beyond our control, it's taken, we feel like we've been taken advantage of. It's like, you don't care about what we feel. You just did it. You said, oh yeah, we'll do this, we'll do that, like you said, politics. That's my experience in going through this process, and I agree with that that the MPC should be part of the decision-making process, and it does work through these small developments. The bigger developments, it will work. Provide us the information. It'll work. We're just like you. We work every day just like you do. We process information just like you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Diego. Mayor Kobe?
Yeah, thank you, Senator. Well, ultimately, the question is, based on Bill 318, is how do we see the Guam land use zoning process and variance application process evolving? And I think there's a general consensus, at least from the community, that the municipal planning councils have to play a greater role, or really should play a greater role, and in my opinion, have to play a greater role in this GLUC process. And predominantly because, if you take a look at, as I've mentioned before at the initial public hearing on 318, if you take a look at all of the other communities nationwide, and to some extent even internationally, the zoning level, the zoning of communities are done at the municipal level. And we always talk about government and how the administration is considered the state and the villages are considered the municipalities, and most in all the states there's a distinction. Here it's kind of muddled because we see the Guam Land Use Commission existing and performing what really should be occurring down at the Guam or at the municipal level. And so I say there's a time, and now is a time for us to evolve as a community, and where we allow the municipal planning councils to have a greater say in what's going on in our communities. And in fact, this island, our government has had a difficult time, preparing and adopting a land use plan. I mean, imagine if we said, okay, communities, you guys are going to have a greater role in approving and adopting zoning and variance applications that are submitted that affect your communities at some point in time. In fact, one of the reason why I mention that is because one of the MPC members that I have sitting on my council is former Senator Marcel Camacho. From day one, and I've been a mayor for 7.5 years, from day one, he and I have had constant dialogues, continuing dialogues about trying to develop some sort of land use planning within our district. Obviously, we haven't been successful as an island in doing it, so could we do that as a district? And in these discussions, the roadblock always tends to be, no matter what we adopt, we have no way of implementing any plans that we adopt at the municipal level, because everything is really controlled and dictated at what we consider the island or the state level. And I think that this would encourage, in fact, it would encourage mayors to think about, okay, as we grow as an island, where do we see things being put as our community grows? Because growth is inevitable. I mean, take a look at what Guam was like 50 years ago. Take a look at what Guam was like even 40 and 30 years ago, and what it is today. Substantially different. In fact, when I left for the military in the 70s, came back to Guam, Flora Pago, Apacento Gardens, and an area called Putitin Sanhadza in the Santa Cruz area was built. And I'm like, where did these things come from? Apacento Gardens is 257 condominium units on a piece of property similar to the size of what you have down in Pago Bay that was proposed for these high-rise hotels. That was a wetland area. In fact, I was shocked because, for those of us who grew up in the village, the fact that they backfilled wetland areas to put this Apacento Gardens in was just dumbfounding. And more importantly, when Flora Pago got built, again, before I returned back to Guam after being away for 15 years, I was even more shocked because, when the first heavy rainfall back in '93 that I was a part of, and that I saw, and then I heard, actually went and validated that my road had flooded, I was amazed, and I thought to myself, why is this place flooding? It's because when they allowed the developer to build Flora Pago, they made no provisions at all in ensuring that the natural water flow that existed through that property that they had backfilled, had provided relief to the water that was coming from the Apacento Gardens and the My Road area through the Floripago property and out towards DOC. Ergo, now, yeah. And so now we, during a heavy rainfall, you get 4.5 feet of water on that road, making it impassable to get onto My Road, to get to your homes. And had that been discussed and actively engaged at the community level, those are the things that the people who live in these communities can raise and ensure that during the ARC comments that are provided to the Department of Land Management, to the Guam Land Use Commission, to look at what's there and to ensure that nothing gets missed. Because, for them, it's going to be near impossible to figure out how to reroute the water so that there's some relief to My Road, because, it's blocked. And, the abutting properties, there's no room to stick any kind of stormwater system between the two abutting properties so that there's relief, or we reestablish the relief of the water coming off of My Road that has nowhere to go. Now, ultimately, I see, as an engineer, the government having to get condemned properties and create ponding basins, to create ponding basins to ensure that there's relief and so that the road doesn't flood, and the matter has been flooding since that development was built. And so, to me, it's an evolution of what has to happen in our island community, giving the municipalities a greater say and a greater review on how Guam is to be developed, and more importantly, how their communities are to be developed. And I'd like to kind of highlight what Senator Brown had said. As we grow as a community, one of the challenges we have is getting professionals, on our municipal planning councils to come in and engage and be a member of our councils. If we engage in this kind of activity, saying, hey, you're going to be on a council that's going to help determine, not only the land use of our area, but approving and reviewing and approving and or disapproving applications that pertain to the growth of our communities, we might be able to get, more people that have the kind of experience that Randy has, engage and says, yeah, this is a good place to be because it's affecting our community. It's affecting where I live. And so ultimately, I just see this process becoming a better way of handling these applications, these zoning applications, or these zoning change applications and variance applications that get submitted by developers to ensure that responsible development occurs. And even if we want to compare this legislation, or we want to tie this legislation as to what resulted as out of the Pago Bay thing. That's just one of many things that we can go back and take a look at. But had we had the agency review final report, even the ARC's final report recommended that the application be tabled until such time as certain questions are answered. And it took, the CCU chair to say, hey, yes, the people are right. The infrastructure in Pago Bay, the water and sewer infrastructure in Pago Bay is delicate and can't support a hotel in Pago Bay or these high-rise towers for people to start paying attention. But we knew that. The people who live in Pago Bay knew that. And had we tabled it and provided more time to dialogue, we could have resolved this issue. And then every time the engineer from that was representing the developer for this high-rise hotel was talking about traffic. I drive through this village every single day. I drive through our Pago Bay typically during rush hour. And when I see that traffic backed up going into Pago Bay or coming out of Pago Bay, it drives me nuts. And when the Guam Land Use Commission required a traffic study, and he kept referencing the 2008 Guam Master Transportation Plan, understanding that that thing was developed with no concept of having a hotel built in Pago Bay. that even if we as a government and you as the Guam Land Use Commission wanted to consider that as a viable document for the concerns of the traffic in Pago Bay, it's moot, because that study did not factor in the possibility of having a hotel in Pago Bay. But we went ahead and approved a variance application, making the people of our communities feel disenfranchised. I'll tell you what, any mayor who gives off a signal to their community that they're being disenfranchised because their concerns aren't being heard, are gone. In 4 years, they're gone. And it happens more at the village level, at the district level, than at the island level, because you got 19 communities, 19 districts voting for the people running for office at large. But when it comes to your community, you're not ensuring that their health, welfare, and safety is being protected. I mean, you are not going to be a mayor for very long. And that's, I think, one of the reasons why most of all the other communities that do zoning, especially within our democracy, does it at the municipal level. Because these people live there. These people have to endure whatever decisions they make. Once it's all said and done, once it's signed off, and once the construction starts occurring, they have to endure and live with that development from inception to completion and thereafter. And so when this bill was introduced, I mean, it was a short bill, 2 pages. I said, well, it's moving in the right direction. And I feel that one of the things that was mentioned at the public hearing is that, well, we send out these zone change applications to the mayor's offices, and I think, Mike, you were saying about 80% don't get any responses. It was pretty high. It was over 50%. And I think one of the reasons why that happens is because a lot of the zone change applications that comes to our office is not controversial. I mean, somebody wants to go from an agriculture to an R1 or agriculture to R2, or even from an R2 or R1 or agriculture to commercial. Oftentimes that's not controversial. But when it matters, when rubber meets the road on a development of this magnitude, we want to make sure that, just as was pointed out, like the military, they want to do a $3 or $6 billion development and growth in this community as it pertains to the military buildup. And we scrutinize them left and right, up and down. And so why are we feeling any resistance to allowing the communities to do the same with these large-scale developments? And so I think it's just an evolution that it's due. And more importantly, I just see a lot of positive things coming out of this. Setting aside the fact that it relieves the GLUC from tackling these controversial issues at their level, let it be handled at the municipal level. 2 is, we failed miserably for the last 3+ decades, in developing a master land use plan. This could actually be the benchmark to launch, land use plans at the village level. If you're going to approve it, you're going to adopt it, and adopt these applications. Let's decide early on how we want to see these adoptions occur. And as far as, there always is, well, these, the municipal planning council members aren't vetted. They don't go to go through a legislative screening, and et cetera, et cetera. In fact, I tell you now that the municipal planning council members don't even submit a financial statement. That's easy to change. I don't see anybody on my council who would be objectionable to submitting a financial statement, just like all of the other elected and appointed officials that exist. I have a former senator. I have a vice president of a major bank on this island. I have several GovGuam retirees and several GovGuam employees. That's where the catch is the GovGuam employees. If you're a GovGuam employee, typically you can't sit on a commission or a board, if I'm not, and most commissions and boards. Well, in the community, I mean, I just kind of take a look at who's interested in addressing and tackling the issues and challenges we face, and giving me guidance on how to spend the monies that are appropriated to our district, that whether they're GovGuam or non-GovGuam employees, that the fact that they're interested and the fact that they want to engage in defining the future of our community, I'll take them. And so there may be some tweaking that needs to be done with that regard. But nonetheless, I look at the 10 members of my council, and they're hungry, they're aggressive. And in fact, the one benefit I think will come out of this is the ARC reports just in general, getting down to the municipal level, so we can actually take a look at what was submitted by the agencies, what was even summarized by the ARC chair, which is the chief planner, and ensuring that as we review all of these documents, that nothing gets missed. Because I tell you what, something got missed when Fort Pago was approved. And that was an agricultural zone lot, that applied for a zone change to R2 and developed. Something got missed, because I tell you what, any engineer would have looked at that and said, there's a big hole in this application, because you are backfilling a wetland area. It may be seasonal, but nonetheless, it's a wetland area. Same thing with Apicento Gardens. And now what happens with Apicento Gardens, we have a road called Naki Street. And those people who have lived on Naki Street, for decades, now get flooded to the point where they can't cross over their road either. And it's one way in and one way out, because it had that rippling effect. And that's what we were trying to avoid with this development in Pago Bay, is having a rippling effect, not just to the Jonia and Pago Bay community, but as Chairman Duenas for the CCU had validated, it's going to have a rippling effect to all of the southern villages that get water from the wells in Jonia and from the wells in Chalampago. And so I just see this as a positive thing. It's tweaking it that's going to be really what we need to do, and how we do that. I think we're all fairly intelligent people, and I think we can have a meeting of the minds to develop those things that will make it work.
Thank you very much, Mayor Gogui. I know there's a few other individuals who are lined up to speak, but I just want to request that the slide be turned to the recommendations that so far has been received by the committee. I will recognize the other two individuals who have requested to make a statement, and then, Mr. Chairman, if we can come to an understanding of, I'm sure there's got to be a middle ground as it applies to this entire process, involving the residents, municipalities, and working with the Guam Land Use Commission. But ladies and gentlemen, the recommendations that were received by the committee based on some of the issues that have been highlighted so far and also discussed here is, the first one is the Executive Order 90-09 mandates Department of Land Management to forward an application up to the Guam Land Use Commission within 60 to 90 days without receiving and attaching ORARC position statements should be rescinded. No application shall be placed. The recommendation is no application should be placed on the Guam Land Use Commission agenda until such time that all position statements are made a part of the application, particularly these agencies, GPA, GWA, BSB, Department of Recreation, Department of Agriculture, Guam EPA, and some of the other member agencies as it applies. The second recommendation that was received by the committee was that no public hearing, municipal public hearing, shall be scheduled within the municipality until such time that all official position statements are received by DLM Planning Division and transmitted together with the application to the mayor's offices. The third recommendation was the mayor shall afford all residents of their village sufficient time to review the complete application prior to the MPC submitting their official resolution to DLM relative to the application. So those are the three recommendations that were forwarded to the committee as a result of the public hearing and any follow-on discussion with regards to the statements that were provided at the public hearing. I know, Mr. Gogui, you did want to make a statement, and then Ms. Strong, and then we'll go ahead and Mr. Chairman, I hope we can come up with a general understanding in terms of really how we should proceed with this particular legislation, because the recommendations themselves already highlight some changes that could and will enhance the process. Now the question is what is the final version going to look like? Mr. Adrian? Thank you, Rodney.
Okay, just want to say thank you, Senators Aguon and Morrison, for recognizing us, the voice of the community, because we wouldn't be here today if we didn't see a problem with the way we move forward with the Guam land use. You know, we, the people of Guam, need to dictate the tempo of how we process land use and approvals or disapprovals, not by some corporation that's operating 8,000 miles away in Bahamas or 2,000 miles away in Asia. If they can't even accommodate this 70-day timeline, as you pointed out there, that's 60 to 90 days, then maybe it's not meant to be here. Okay? We talk about community benefit agreements, right? That's what it's all about. You heard the gentleman from Enron articulate that the developer came in there with maybe a one-point PowerPoint slide, and that's all they had, and there's not enough information for them to make a recommendation to support it. So, sorry, not this time. That's the kind of input that needs to go into this process, sir, because if we're going to accommodate developers who have no ties to the island of Guam, but yet we don't accommodate the citizens of Guam, then I think that's problematic in the way we deal with land use for the future. So I wanted to say thank you for putting us on the map, putting us up there in the flow chart, because it's greatly appreciated. Okay? I want to just reiterate what everyone's been saying. I'm an advocate of the MPC's involvement in this process. And if it's called a layer of bureaucracy, then so be it. So be it. But it's important that we, the people of Guam, decide the land use in conjunction with the Guam Land Use Commission. I'll just keep it short. Okay? Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gobi. Ms. Strong?
Thank you. Diane Strong, a resident of Jonia. One of the problems is that we don't want to be forced to be in an adversarial relationship. And the more opportunities to communicate, that means round trip, not one way down Route 4. Communication. I learned that at UOG. I think Joanne did too. So at the public hearing of June 9th, because I watched the whole video and I took notes. Thank you so much to Tom. Chairman Arroyo said, this bill increases the probability of subjective decisions. Director Borja, Executive Secretary of the GLUC, says the MPC can block any project based on their subjectivity. If we have information from the ARC, if the ARC agencies are required to make decisions and say, oh, this developer, you think your water requirement is 44,000 gallons? The same building in Tuman, their requirement is 65,000 gallons. We have the math. Everybody has that. They've had that for years, unless people have more toilets now and maybe their diet has changed. I don't know. Commissioner Batten said they don't have financial disclosures. They don't mention if they have a conflict of interest. At the municipal planning level, we know who might have a conflict of interest, and I'm sure that all of we local people will hold them to that standard of requirement. And just as you say, in tweaking the bill, these municipal planning councils will develop rules and regulations approved by the AAA process, unlike GLUC's rules and regulations. So I think that every village should develop a land use master plan. I think it's a great idea that came up, and put them all together. So that's what I say. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Strong. Mr. Chairman?
As I said earlier, you're not getting any pushback from me, and I don't think any of the members from the Land Use Commission, about accepting more participation from the communities on the decisions that we make at our level. Again, my only concern is that in the interest of improving efficiency and saving time and money for everybody involved, there has to be a way to combine both authorities making these decisions. If we don't do that, then, of course, the additional time and expense. But also, it places the Guam Land Use Commission in a less valuable position, because really what we're doing is only moving forward with the decisions that are being made at the MPC level. And if that's the case, then I really don't see a purpose for the Land Use Commission. If the decisions are better made at the community level, then let it be made at the community level. And take it and get rid of the Land Use Commission. Because really there is no decision that we would make if it's not first approved by you. Unless, and this hasn't been addressed, what happens if there's a decision made by the MPC at that level to disapprove an application? Does that prevent the Land Use Commission from approving it? So those are just the things that I'm saying. So really, the only thing I could see is kind of finding a way to combine these two entities to form one entity, and save everybody time, money, and expense. But at the same time, allowing for more input from the communities in making that decision.
It's a very interesting proposal, and in regards to whether in fact the municipality or the Municipal Planning Council will have veto authority. You know, the legislation, I think the language presently is very clear as it applies to that, is bringing that initial decision, phase one of the entire process, into the municipality so that they can ultimately make that decision. You know, ladies and gentlemen, it's been a very good process so far in terms of revisiting exactly what we have in place. And just the recommendations that have been forwarded to the committee and were just mentioned just a few minutes ago, that would be already providing for additional information for the municipalities to be able to acknowledge the impact and the implications of any proposed development within their village. And you're looking at this, even the mayors would be empowered. I'm trying to find a way in which we can find a middle ground. I understand about, okay, if you're going to give the decision-making process to the municipalities, then you don't need a Guam Land Use Commission. To the contrary, I can envision the Guam Land Use Commission's existence to continue to be an integral part of this entire community in terms of facilitating some master plans, whether it be the Northern Land Use Master Plan or the Guam Land Use Master Plan or the Southern Land Use Master Plan. I can see the Guam Land Use Commission overseeing and facilitating that process so that it's consistent with the overall growth and development of our island community. When you look at municipalities, the residents are concerned about what's in their neighborhood. How is this going to impact my quality of life? How can we ensure that we participate in the process so that in fact it doesn't diminish, or it at least at a very minimum sustains the quality of life of that community or that municipality, or even better, improves it? So if we really look at our residents and we listen to some of the concerns that have been shared here, and also a number of the mayors that provided testimony at the initial public hearing, it really all comes down to that component, is making sure that I don't want to dismiss the membership and the importance of the Guam Land Use Commission, the present members today, because the decisions you have made, albeit aside from the Pagu Bay incident, has been you've revealed the entire process. But there are some serious areas here that really need to be revisited, when in fact the municipalities were not directly considered in their position. So I certainly anticipate the proposed amendments to this. I was hoping that we would get a direct perhaps suggestion or recommendation so that we can find that middle ground and ensure that the municipalities and the residents would have a say in it. Before I ask Senator Brown to, I know you're itching to say a few words, I'd like to ask Senator Morrison if you have any comments you would like to make before.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate everyone's input. Has the Guam Land Use Commission dealt with any applications or proposals in Hagåtña? And the reason why I asked is because I know the HRRA and having that clear mandate and how they address the redevelopment or revitalization going forward. Does the GLUC have any involvement of any process or with that process?
The last one that I can remember we reviewed was I think it was an apartment building near the Aguon shopping center. And when we received that application, our initial response was to send it to the but the feedback that we got, there weren't any rules in place to make the decisions on those applications at that level, so it reverted back to us.
But at the end, they do have kind of a clear mandate in development in Hagåtña.
Yes, and we're more than happy to let those decisions be made at that level.
Okay. Well, Mr. Chair, I just wanted to note that for the record, because obviously there is some processes that have been put in place that have or instruments or boards or authorities that are handling these type of process with their community. So I appreciate the chairman being open to building upon this process and seeing that at least in our capital that there is a redevelopment authority made up of members that I believe that are major property owners of the community. I think that's mainly in part their membership of that authority. Again, I also think they have ex officios that have regulatory or are made up of regulatory bodies that help guide development in Hagåtña. So I just wanted to mention that knowing that what we're doing here, we're seeing that there is a process, and I just wanted to see how that works when an application comes through for a proposed project in Hagåtña. So I thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Morrison. Did I understand this correctly, Mr. Chairman, that you're willing to yield to the Hagåtña Restoration Authority for zone changes and variances in the future?
Yes.
If they have rules and regs in place?
Yeah, and like I said,
So let me ask you a follow-on question then. If the Hagåtña Restoration Authority, you're willing to yield your decision-making powers to that entity, how would we not reach out to the municipalities and not also endorse a similar process, as long as rules and regs, you did qualify your statement.
Right.
As long as proper rules and regs are adjudicated so that the process is, at least I'm adding this, so that the process is transparent and open. But if you're willing to concede to that as a process that can be applied, then just extending that requirement for rules and regs within the municipalities and the mayors, I think that would be consistent with taking that position.
Exactly, and that's the reason why I say if the decisions are better made at the municipal level, there is no need for the Guam Land Use Commission. Those decisions should be made there, and the Guam Land Use Commission should go away or do something else.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. Senator Brown? I'm sorry, Senator.
We were here collectively when that law was passed, and we understand some very broad powers that were granted to them, including tax incentives that could be provided, because the desire was to redevelop the capital and provide a lot of, particularly the traditional Spanish character. I mean, people can argue about the whole colonial history, but that was actually put into the process because there was a desire to revitalize and design the capital in a way that would be reflective of our history, good, bad, ugly, and different. But that incentive was actually put with the members, specifically for this jurisdiction here. We also were there, Senator Aguon, at the same time Itanota died. And there was a reason Itanota died. There's some very major players on Guam that, and I've mentioned this to some before in my village, that get to decide in their minds the future of Guam and where Guam's going to go and what's going to develop where, irrelevant of what the residents of Guam want. They sit and carve out the island, and they're the ones that make the phone calls. And some members of the legislature got those phone calls during Itanota. After months and years of going out to the villages and having input and deciding, including conservation areas of Pago Bay that were set aside in that development. I recall we were here. We were in that floor in there debating that. And at the end of the day, after all that time and effort and the $1 million plus $2 million, whatever was invested in Itanota, it died on the floor of the Guam legislature. Didn't die because I didn't want to support it, but it certainly died because other parties were told or influenced or ultimately said, oh, okay, we agree with these major players, and we killed it. They killed it. The legislature killed that process. And it hasn't been resurrected since then. So I don't know if it's you take it a piece at a time, you know, Senator Morrison, with your Southern development, because there are properties, there are major property holdings back in the 1970s that were acquired that most people have no clue. The average person has no clue, particularly in Southern Guam, where these properties are and what the intentions of the investors that put all that money 40, almost 50 years ago, who intend to develop these areas. Most residents of Guam have no clue. If you've worked in these areas and have background in them, we have some idea of where those properties are. But residents don't. If the project was previously approved many, many years ago, you know, we may not have recalled 20, 30 years ago if it was approved. What happens if they come back? Is there a timeline? Those are things that also need to be looked at. If a project gets approved, then even though we say the developer has a year, if they have a clearing and grading permit, then they're allowed to, even if they just clear the property, then it doesn't nullify their approval. I think there should be a certain timeline. I don't think a clearing and grading permit should be the basis under which we determine whether development's approval stays active. We probably need to decide what that year should be. Do they have 3 years to develop, 4 years to develop? If they don't, does it nullify the authority or the rezoning or the variance that was granted? Because the dynamics can change depending on other activities within the village. If it was approved 20 years ago, now it's going to come in. Should that stand? Those are things that need to be looked at. But, you know, the power play on Guam, there's a reason things are dysfunctional. Even when they don't make any sense to us, we're like, hey, God, how did that decision get made? It got made in the interest of someone because that system was set up to be functional for them. And right now, disempowering the people of Guam to have the ability to decide the future of Guam means a select few people make those decisions. It means we get to cut a deal and, hey, I got a big piece of property. You buy it, no problem. We'll get that approval through. That's how it happens. And right now, that's how this project slam dunk. This project that was advertised to others for, I didn't realize parts of Guam were for sale. 2 sections, Pago Bay was for sale. I didn't know, I found that out recently as a part of this process. It was being advertised. And I'm just one person in Pago Bay, but I had no clue, and I kind of think I'm an informed person in my community. It's because there are many key players here that have the wherewithal that make those decisions that will be disenfranchised if this decision-making process is returned to the people. That is the reality. I know, we've been behind the closed doors. We know who these people are. We know who gets the phone calls. Hey, support this bill. Hey, don't support Lana. No problem, send me your fundraising tickets. I got you covered. And there are some, unfortunately, of our colleagues that have fallen for that. That's what keeps them on. But, you know, for me personally, it is really so fundamental. If we're going to do all this development and growth on Guam and advertise it, if it doesn't benefit our common people here, what is the point? So richer people can get richer at the expense of my quality of life or my family's quality of life? You tell me who here at the table is going to admit or agree to that. Whoever publicly, any member of the legislature, any elected official is going to come and say, oh yeah, I support that. They'll never say it publicly. But deals get cut, people get the benefits, other people suffer the consequences. And moving forward, I don't think that's the future for Guam I want to see. Senator Morrison, Senator Aguon, you guys are on the other side of the Pago Bridge. Right? This is what we say, the gateway. Maybe that's where it needs to start, is if it can't get the whole island to agree, then maybe it needs to start with the southern residents and have that input and decide that. Do you set up such a structure as we set up for the Hagåtña revitalization so that that process exists and we're not disenfranchised? Because I don't know too many public people are going to come out and acknowledge that, gosh, no, I'm not really representing you. I'm representing certain interests. But trust me, there's a lot of them that look at elected officials to be bought and sold. And unfortunately, some of us are bought and sold. But this whole idea that Guam needs to develop and develop and develop, and we need to build more hotel rooms and more condos for who? It's not for us. It's not for our children. It's not even being tended. I'm sorry. How many of us can afford $3, $4, $500,000, $1 million, $2 million condos? That's what's being built. That's what's being marketed. It's not for us. I don't look at Guam as, oh my goodness, if we don't sell our soul here, they're not going to come. Last time I checked the map, we're a little piece of U.S. soil sitting out in the middle of the Pacific. There's not a lot of this sitting around this part of the world. My view is, you want us, you court us. We just don't think we're going to roll over and hand you whatever we got. I've never looked at it that way. And we've gone through the big boom of the 90s and the recession that came, when the Japanese economy fell, and I'll tell you, Guam's still doing pretty good. What we have is certainly far more than our parents and our grandparents that lived through the war ever had. Yeah, we got problems, but God, what we have available at our disposal in comparison. So I really think that maybe you need to start. Why don't we start with the South? Because there's still a lot of people that will come forth and say, this is what I want. I don't believe they think there's just a few of us that have this concern. I think there are many, many people. As time goes on, as our transition comes in our own lives and we look to the future of our children or our grandchildren, you look at things it's not about us anymore. We've lived most of our life. But what Guam and what legacy are we going to leave for them? Were they going to be the outsiders because they can't afford the multi-million-dollar condos? When we are no longer families and Chamorro families that have land to divide? Fortunately, my boy will be a recipient of his heritage from his grandfather and great-grandfather and great-grandmother, and he'll get a piece of property that will get transferred to him from that. But there are many of our local people, even those that have moved there that call Guam home, that have no land to divide anymore to give out. There's not land even big enough to put a house on. Mes basta sell it because there's not enough to divide among, and how many families have we seen that happen with? So the idea of starting, if it is with the southern villages, and that's something the southern communities want, gosh, we'll be there to support it. Because I really think that critical time is coming in our growth and development to really say who gets to decide that. And right now, it's not us. This project made it very clear to me. It's not us. It's not us residents. Or the few they can barter with to get favors from or say, hey, no problem, hire your son, man. Who can work at our hotel? We've got it covered. You need to get the contract for landscaping. Come on, we know how the deals get cut. Here, we're going to build your marina. It's not even part of our development. And we don't even know if a marina can be built in Pago Bay because Pago Bay is very shallow. We don't even know if the Army Corps, the United States Army Corps is going to come and approve it. But let's throw that in too because, hey, I can get your support. So you can come in and say that you've lived in Pago Bay for 56 years and you support this development even though you don't have water pressure. So, Senator, I appreciate the time because, gosh, I don't think I've felt as passionately about something as I am about this issue now. And it's not just for my village. I think it's for everyone else on Guam that very soon this will come knocking on everybody's door, regardless of what village that you're in. I mean, if I want high-rise and bright lights, I enjoy Tumon. It's beautiful. But I don't live in Tumon. And I don't want to live in Tumon. I love visiting Tumon. But who gets to make that decision? Does somebody just come in here and pick whatever part of Guam they want to develop their way? So that the ones that come and advocate these projects are already the big money people in this community who want to make more money at our expense because we're the little people and we don't count. And we get to be ignored as we were in these hearings when the developer is sitting there lying to the Land Use Commission. I know, because some of these department and agencies they're referring to, I've been there, especially roadways. That's not too long ago as a DPW. And I see they're lying, and they're like, oh, okay. No verification to what's being said to go, is this even truthful? And when you're talking about our homes that many people spend their entire life, 30 plus years maybe paying that mortgage, and they don't count because you're the little people. You don't count. Some big money developer comes in here and, oh gosh, let's roll out the red carpet for them. Because, Senator, I don't like inconsistency. Fair is fair. If you're going to slam the military against the wall and say, hey, you want to come and do this? You bring the money and you pay for the adverse consequences.
You pay that $140 million now, is it 140, whatever it is, to Guam Waterworks and upgrade the infrastructure. Well, we should be telling developers that too. Right now, Senator, from my mom's house, who's barely a minute away from my house in the morning, I have to make sure I get there at a certain time, because when I try to make a left turn going back into Chalinda, I fear getting rear-ended, and that almost happened to me several months ago one morning. Because there's no middle lane, there's no turning lane. How many times do we wait for the next crash in front of Indalana Road? How many, if we look at the accidents, because there's no turning lane. I have to wait and be careful driving out of my mom's driveway because I'm going to get slammed, because what do people do? They don't slow down. They drive off the road to get around. And you know, Manji, you turn into your road there. That's what we have now. It's like playing chicken. Am I going to drive fast enough to make that left turn, or do I have to drive all the way up to the intersection to prevent getting rear-ended? I sure as hell don't want that to happen with my little boy in the back seat. So why do we have to endure that, and then we're going to have more of that because what? Certain people want to cut deals and get their development pushed through. Look how quickly. From October of last year, when the ARC met, to what? April of this year when this project got approved? Wow, record time. Try and do that in some other jurisdiction. Go to Hawaii and try and do that. But boy, here, wow, we have so many different standards because who gets to make the decision? And I just don't think that's right, Senator. If in the next few months, those of you that are running for office or running for re-election, you're going to talk to us about our quality of life and how you're going to improve the life of ourselves and our families, God, if we don't have that in our own home, what do we have, and who are we developing Guam for? Who are we developing Guam for? I think the best people to make that decision are the people that are here, that have their life investment, that have their families here. And I don't care if you're Chamorro, Chinese, Chuukese, Filipino, it doesn't matter. If your home and your investment is here and you care about this island, then more power to you. But I think you get to have that say. Not a select few that sit here and cut up this island and decide where the next major development's going to be. And that's how it gets played now. And it gets played now because we have such a dysfunctional land use process. And when we actually worked at it, who killed it? It's not the little people. And you know, Senator, because you were there, I was there. The big players on Guam that didn't want the land use, because all of a sudden they couldn't decide where that affected their property. Oh, you mean, I can't develop that part of Pago Bay? You're going to put that for conservation? Oh, hell no. And when the time came to make that decision, it got killed in that floor. And it's never been heard from since. So I appreciate the time. I can't believe I'm telling you this because you're a Democrat. God, this is painful. Painful. But I really appreciate the fact that both you and Senator Morrison have introduced this bill and made this bipartisan effort, because I'll tell you, we're not alone in this concern. I mean, we're not. I mean, there's a lot of things you can compromise on, and maybe it's at a distance, but boy, when it hits home, when it hits your, even more than you, when it hits your family, you know, some of those things aren't up for compromise. So thank you very much for giving us this time, and I hope in the course of this process we even come up with maybe better ideas than what we initially thought about.
Thank you very much, Senator Brown. Randy, you have final comments?
Yeah, just very briefly. Bill 318 is not perfect, but I think it's workable. Tomorrow morning, we're going to need the Land Use Commission. We need Land Management's Planning Division, all of the expertise to be able to work through a certain time period. Let's remember that the Southern Development Master Plan is supposed to have been kicked off, and we're going to work on that. What I'd like to remind everyone at the table is that when it comes time for public input into that Southern Development Master Plan, let's ensure that, in fact, we fully make the transition from the Guam Land Use Commission to municipal zoning administration. That document can be comprehensive, and we can amend the zoning law further there that takes us out of this uncomfortable dual approval process and two hearings process that right now seems to be very much in demand. I mean, it's an imposition, it's an extension of time, it takes more time, but I think it's for the good. I agree. In the future, I'm hoping, and I will be at the public meetings, and I will tell those that are on that council, with the administration as they develop the master plan for the South. Put in the full transition, and the GLUC needs to go away. It doesn't have to go away tomorrow. I mean, some mayors and their councils are like raring to go. Others may not be ready to go. They need to learn this process. It's not the most complicated thing in the world to be a zoning administration. It really isn't. But it's complicated enough and it's unfamiliar, something they haven't done before. So there's a learning curve that we have to take with our councils. So, like I said, some will be more ready than others. The next 2 years, at least for the South, we can either do a development authority or just forget the development authority. Just we can make that transition and give them the full authority to do it at the municipal level. So just remember that. It takes participation to be able to put that comment in and have the smart, whoever the consultant is or the experts from GovGuam, draft the companion language that will be an amendment to the zoning law or a new zoning law that fully supports that new development plan for those municipalities being comprehensively planned. So let's all just remember that. And for those that are watching on television, come out and be participation and say, we want that transition. This isn't perfect, but it's workable given the circumstances we're under now. Thank you for the opportunity and having this roundtable. I appreciate it, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Sablon. I want to thank everyone for your contribution, not only this evening, but over the course of the last month in the development, not only of this legislation, but also the other components and part of the discussion. I certainly appreciate it, and we understand that there's a process that needs to evolve over time, because what we're hearing and what we've heard over the course of the public hearing is one massive message, and that's give the municipalities that opportunity to be able to decide on their quality of life and to sustain it. We do have Ms. Lohan, but Mayor Gogui, you wanted to say a few words first? Then we'll close.
Yes, thank you, Senator. And I certainly hope this is the last comment. But I'm going to talk about the monkey in the room, because there's a monkey sitting on this table, and it's based on the chairman's questions. And I appreciate his passion and his diligence in trying to run as the chairman the Guam Land Use Commission and the challenges the commission faces on a regular basis when they get these applications. But this roundtable discussion was primarily is focused on 318. Obviously, there's a similar bill that was introduced in 335 by Senator Atta regarding this exact same thing, but it was a lot different. In fact, at this month's Mayor's Council Guam meeting, Senator Atta came out with his staff and gave a PowerPoint presentation on 335 and talked about why this bill that he introduced on changes to the Guam Land Use Commission, calling it a hybrid commission, might work. Well, but he also pointed out that during the public hearing, there were a lot of community residents that came and showed up for the meeting, and most of them opposed it. As a matter of fact, I didn't attend the meeting, but that's exactly the point. He had noted that there were no mayors who attended Bill 335's public hearing. And there actually was a reason for that, because, even with that hybrid commission, it basically says, we put mayors on the commission, we have the appointed members of the GLUC, but in the end, if there's a stalemate, the chair, who makes the odd man out, gets to make the final say. And as far as I'm concerned, that still keeps a process in place that currently exists. If there's a stalemate of 4 mayors and 4 commissioners that we can't see a clear majority approval of an application, especially if they're controversial, then it's a stalemate. It's tabled until the issues on the and concerns by the commissioners is resolved, and that no one person, whether it be a mayor or the chairman of the appointed chairman of the Guam Land Use Commission, says, as controversial as it is, I make the decision, and we're going to move this direction. And that's one of the reasons why 335, which is the monkey in the room, I just see it sitting there on the table, didn't make any headway amongst the council, and the mayor, and that the mayors did not come out to testify on the bill. They could have testified and talked about the these exact things that I'm mentioning now. But I mean, was it worth the effort? Because obviously there's some passion regarding 318 and the merits of 318 and putting zoning responsibilities at a level where it's not only, we talk about transparency, but it's not just transparency. It's allowing the community that's going to be directly impacted to engage and have a real say on the direction that's taken on these zone change applications and these variance applications that's going to affect their lives and God permitting, the lives of their children, their grandchildren, their great-grandchildren after we're long gone and passed away. And so, so I just wanted to mention about the monkey in the room. I understand there's a bill out there called the Hybrid Guam Land Use Commission. But I mean, the root problem of that particular bill is the fact that it still engages the appointed members as having the final say, regardless of the controversy that may occur on some of these major development projects. It still gives the appointed members a say, and takes away from the impact and the feedback and the desires of the communities that are being directly impacted in that hybrid bill. And so maybe there's a way to merge the two. But at a minimum, what I like about this particular bill, it requires, the ARC to do their due diligence and to to receive and obtain all of the necessary input from all the agencies that are part of the ARC. It requires that the ARC chair prepare and submit a final report regarding the application in itself, and it requires that information to be provided to the municipality that is being affected, and allow the members of the municipal planning councils to not only review it, but to share it with the community. And it allows the municipal planning councils to say, hey, I think you missed something. As intelligent as we are, we're all prone to error, and I tell you what, when I wasn't here, I literally wasn't here when Flor Pago got built. I literally was not here when Apicentro Gardens got approved and built. But having grown up in Orchard Chalampago, I would have had a legitimate concern, having pastured my cows and finding the water holes that existed, when I'm pasturing cows, saying, hey, wait a minute, that's a wetland area, and what are you going to do to provide continued relief to the water that travels through that area if you build this development? And believe it or not, and you can talk to the owners of the property. There are 2 condominium units in Flor Pago that have cracked foundations because the water that hits that and backs up onto My Road that sits 4 feet high during a heavy rain has over the last 20 plus years affected that backfill to the point where the foundations are giving way. And now how would you feel, or as a parent or as an owner, if you were the ones that bought those 2 units and now there's no recourse in going after the developer, who built the building, and say, hey, there was a fundamental flaw in the design of this development, and now I have a cracked foundation. I can't sell my home, I can't repair it, I can't, because it's not the structure itself that's the problem, it's the whole lot itself that's a fundamental problem. And by bringing it down to the municipal level, I just see the merits of making sure that these things don't get missed, and that in making sure that these things get addressed. Joanne mentioned about the turning lane, after the Route 4, Route 10 intersection into Pago Bay. One of the first issues I brought up with DPW, and I continually bring up with DPW, and they say, well, I'm sorry, Mayor, but we don't have any monies right now slated for the improvements to that part of Route 4 between Route 4 and the Pago Bay Bridge, Route 4, Route 10 intersection and Pago Bay Bridge. But once we have a project ready to go, we'll incorporate it. In fact, I had to fight for the turning lane between Route 4 and Route 10 intersection all the way through Sinahanya to get a turning lane integrated into the design when I first took office, design that had already been approved, plans that had already been awarded, a contract that had already been awarded. I had to fight tooth and nail. to make sure that they incorporated a turning lane on that project. And, I had direct resistance from Public Works on making that happen, because what they really wanted to do is put a bike lane on both sides of the road. But given that turning lane that is now there, we've saved lives.
How many serious accidents have you had turning right into Flora Park?
Oh, humongous.
Before the center lane was installed.
Humongous. And not even Flora Park, we're talking in front of the church, after somebody gets done with attending Mass. And one of the reasons why, like Joanne, I tend to be passionate about these kinds of issues, especially in my community, is, I have had close relatives die on that road. And this nonsense of approving developments or making changes to the community where the infrastructure can't support that kind of growth without the engagement of the government of Guam or the developer in accommodating the improvements that need to be made, that's got to stop. Because it's not just about quality of life. We're talking about the life and safety of our community. And if you have a mayor out there that's in office that's not concerned about that, they're not going to be a mayor for very long. And that's why having these kinds of issues discussed and engaged and having a real say in this kind of process, to me, is critical. It's important. And again, it's allowing us to evolve into the 21st century and catch up with what everybody else is doing throughout the country. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Ms. Hall, final comments, and then we'll conclude this discussion.
Thank you so much. I'm glad that the chairman is really open to the discussion to engage more of the community. And I'd like to see some parts of this bill. I'd like to see this bill, but maybe, like Randy had suggested, it needs to be over a longer period of time where people feel. And in the meantime, without the legislation, you have the ability to go into the villages right now and to hold your hearings in the village together in complement with the mayor's council. And maybe that's what we need. I'm a big proponent of piloting something, seeing how it feels, because I think a lot of anxiety is based because you don't really know how much power you're really losing, and maybe you'll find out that in fact, because you'll have a lot of support from the community, you have been more supported. I know there's a word out there that I'm looking for, but I'd like to see empowered. So I'd like to see maybe that we use this bill and have this done, putting a period of time for it, and then something maybe that it applies to the South. I don't know if the people in the North feel as passionate about some of the need to participate in the decision, but then also maybe in the meantime, having the actual GLUC members, not land management holding the hearing, but actually the GLUC sitting together in the Municipal Planning Council meetings, having this full discussion with the developer and having it see what that feels like. Because maybe that will give you an opportunity to see what the issues really are and where our emphasis and energies need to be placed. Because maybe at the end of the day, it becomes something similar to what Aguon Restoration Council looks like, where it's in fact not it's invested in the municipality, but it's a combination of people that are appointed by the governor as well as people that come from the community. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Lohan. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your participation this evening. Mrs. Strong is like raising her hand. Very insistent. Okay, Ms. Strong.
Hey, Senator from my village. Just quickly, since Mayor Gogui mentioned Bill 335, the hybrid GLUC, I just want to remind people that that bill didn't really refine what size project would be requiring a hybrid GLUC, and they kind of talked about, well, we'll put it at $1 million or more. In 1998, it was major and super major projects. If we go to a village level decision making, we won't have to worry about what project, which project, all projects. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Strong. Thank you again, ladies and gentlemen, for your participation in this roundtable discussion. And there's a lot of takeaways in regards to some of the conversations that have been shared with with everyone here. So I really appreciate your participation, your involvement, and as the legislation evolves, you will be forwarded copies. Okay, thank you very much again. Please enjoy your evening.